what we all want for Ukraine, for our shared security, and for our global stability. Finally, we will address Russia's ongoing campaign of destabilizing actions against NATO allies. We see acts of sabotage, assassination, dangerous jamming of civilian airlines, and attacks on critical infrastructure, including undersea infrastructure. And NATO is responding, including through Baltic Sentry in the Baltic Sea and with increased vigilance across the board. With that, I'm ready to take your questions.
All right, we'll start with CNN.
Good afternoon.
Oh, microphone. Claire Sebastian from CNN. How do you interpret the comments that we heard from President Trump on Monday that Ukraine may someday be Russian? Do you take it seriously? And even if you don't, how worried are you that this makes Western commitment to Ukraine appear fragile in Moscow's eyes and could undermine future security guarantees?
We are intensely coordinating with President Trump's team at all levels, and these are very good conversations. This week we have many senior American officials visiting Europe, here at NATO, but also, of course, in Munich at the security conference. There is a convergence of views that we have to make sure, one, that Ukraine gets in the best possible position to start talks. Two, to make sure that whatever comes out of those talks, and when that will happen, that we have to be sure collectively and assure collectively that what comes out of it is durable. So no repeat of what we had with the Minsk agreement in 2014.
All right, Reuters.
Secretary General Andrew Gray from Reuters, you said that the assistance needs to be equalised, assistance to Ukraine between the United States and other allies, but you've just given figures that show the majority of that aid comes from other allies, not from the United States. So how much of a rebalancing does there actually need to be? And secondly, on the same theme, you said in Davos that if the Trump administration is willing to continue supplying American weapons, Europe will pick up the bill. How many European leaders have agreed to do that, and have they told you where the money will come from?
Well, first of all, we are on the right trajectory, indeed, when it comes to the aim of equalizing what the US basically decides as a one nation within NATO comparable to all the other allies within NATO, so that we are equalizing. And here we see that Canada and Europe are even over 50% now, so that is good. But we have to maintain that trajectory. That's crucial, and I completely concur with President Trump and his team that this is the only sensible way forward. Then, of course, to the question of future support for Ukraine, no doubt there will be a debate, I expect, between allies, who is going to pay for it, where it comes from, etc. But there is also a large agreement between all allies that we have to make sure that Ukraine has what it needs in terms of training, in terms of military equipment, to make sure that whenever peace talks start, they can do that from a position of strength.
All right, Sky News.
Thank you. I'm Deborah Haynes from Sky News. Donald Trump has repeatedly called on European NATO allies to spend more on defence, and he's also made clear that his priorities for security are facing up to the threat posed by China and defending America's own borders. How confident are you, therefore, that America would come to Europe's aid if European NATO allies came under attack, and could European allies alone defend themselves?
I think my reaction needs to have two elements. First of all, on the defense spending. President Trump has consistently asked for the Europeans to do more. We had a pledge in Wales in 2014, and basically not a lot happened after 2014. And it really started to take off when he was president in post-2016, 2017, and particularly in 2018, 2019, up to today, including the 20% increase, 23 compared to 24. US, NATO allies, so excluding the US, Canada and the EU, paying 20% more. And we have to continue this. The good thing is that what we have in place now is a process based on NATO's defense planning process, which will lead to clarity on what needs to be done to keep us safe, the capability targets. From there we will see where the gaps are. We know already that it probably will be in the area of missile defense, air and missile defense, in the area of logistics, military mobility, long-range weapons, but also to increase the strength of our armies. Yes, the Navy and of course our Air Force, but particularly when it comes to our armies, we'll have to do more, including making sure that they can fight prolonged wars and that they will be more heavily armed, including with tanks. And all this costs money. We are now getting those numbers on the table, and this is the big difference with 2014. There it was, let's do 2%. Now we will have a content-driven debate. How do we fill the gap between where we are and where we have to be? And I expect this to be north of 3%, I said before, but I'm not committing to a number now because we are still at the early stage in exactly coming to the details. And then on Europe and the rest of the world, I think when we discuss this with our American colleagues within NATO, there is a clear joint assessment that what happens in Ukraine or what happens in Europe, and particularly now in Ukraine, is not only Russia, Ukraine, or Russia, Europe. It also involves North Korea, China, Iran. So there is an interconnection now between what happens in the North Atlantic and in the Euro-Atlantic area on the one hand, but also in the Pacific on the other hand. And that means that all these theaters are getting intertwined. And that means from a strategic point of view, we have to make sure that we assess them like this. But I completely understand that the Americans want the Europeans and the Canadians to pay more. And again, back to the first question, we are assessing exactly what needs to be done based on the capability target process.
All right, Ukraine Public Broadcasting.
Thank you. One of the possible points of US peace plan is to postpone Ukraine's accessions for NATO for several years or even decades. What's your position on that? And short of NATO membership, how can NATO allies provide Ukraine security guarantees after possible ceasefire? Thank you.
We have one problem here, and that is that we have democracy, and that means that journalists ask questions to the politicians coming in, to me as Secretary General, and that is great. The big difference, of course, with Moscow is that Vladimirovich Putin is not facing this. So he can keep his ideas close to himself. And I do not want him to be wiser than he is already. He is sitting there in that reclining chair, awaiting what I'm going to say here and others will say at NATO. I know two things. One, we have to make sure that Ukraine is in the best possible position whenever talks will start about the future of this conflict. And when we have brought it to a conclusion, that the outcome of that discussion, the peace deal or whatever it will be, has to be durable, enduring, has to be concrete, carved in stone, that he will never ever again try to attack 1 square kilometer or 1 square mile of Ukraine. These two things are for me crucial. And then we can easily brainstorm about the best way forward, including NATO, other countries getting involved, exactly how to do that. But again, it makes him wiser than he should be. This is all part, of course, of future talks within the alliance, and then to a certain extent, probably also with him. But let's not make him wiser than he is already.
DPA, up in the back here.
Thank you. Ansgar Hase, German press agency, DPA. Secretary General, according to new calculations, Russia spent more on the military and armament last year than all European allies combined. Do you consider these calculations credible? And if so, how do you assess these findings? Thank you.
Well, I mean, we can always go through the numbers and then probably hint at 1 or 2 points where they are not correct or overcorrect or whatever. But let's look at the bigger picture here. And the bigger picture is that Russia at this moment is spending 40% of its state budget on defense, is spending almost 10% of its national income on defense. And of course you have to have the purchasing power figured in those numbers. I understand that it has been done. So for me it is also confirmation of the fact of what I tried to say in my speech in December, that yes, we are safe now. Our deterrence and defense is strong at this moment, but not in 4 or 5 years. If we do not take some difficult decisions this year about, yes, Ukraine, obviously, but also about defense spending, doing much, much more than the 2% we pledged in Wales, and those not yet on 2%, please get there before summer, but also on production. We have to make sure that we produce enough. And this is a problem not only for the European part of NATO, but also the US part of NATO. Because all of us, from California up to and including Ankara, we are not producing enough. We have to do more. More shifts, more production lines.
Interfax Ukraine.
Thank you, Secretary General.
Good afternoon.
Goedemiddag.
Goedemiddag.
Okay. Irina Somber, News Agency, Interfax, Ukraine. Question regarding today Ramstein Group. What is your expectation? What kind of outcome can be from this meeting? Will it die? Will it survive? And if it will survive, what kind of role can play NATO in this?
Well, clearly you need both, because what the Ramstein format, the UDCG, is doing is making sure that allies and other countries outside NATO commit to make sure that Ukraine has what it needs in terms of particularly support with concrete material to fight the war against Russia. And I already mentioned some of the big announcements the last couple of 2 weeks from Canada, Sweden, the Netherlands and France. And no doubt, I hope today, but also the coming days, you will see new announcements coming out. So you need that format. And then you need to set you to make sure that you organize all the aid being delivered into Ukraine in the best possible way, that it has maximum use for you guys in Ukraine to fight the war. Plus, of course, making sure that the training takes place. Because what you need is the defense gear to defend yourself, the tanks and the anti-ballistic missiles, the the air defense systems and everything you need to defend yourselves and to fight the war, but also the training. And that is what NSETU is organizing. So we need those two. So I think there's a future for both.
All right. Echo Radio. Here in the front, in the center.
Hello, my name is Artem Besedin. I am from ECHO. This is Russian media in exile. So my question is...
I was once on your station when you were still in Moscow in 2011.
Thank you so much. Danish intelligence reports that Russia is preparing to attack an EU country. And if so, why isn't NATO preparing for war instead of waiting to Russia to weaken in Ukraine? Some NATO members predict a Russian attack in 5 to 10 years. Does NATO share this view, and what timeline does it consider most realistic?
Well, let me not comment on every thing coming out of the intelligence community, which I take very seriously, and in this case what comes out of the Danish intelligence community. But it is, of course, we have to take note of this. But let me bring it back to what I said before, and that is that at the moment, if Putin would attack NATO, the reaction will be devastating. He will lose. So let him not try it. And he knows this. The deterrence and defense is very strong. What we have to make sure of is that 4 or 5 years from now, given his speed of ramping up his defense industry production and all the other stuff, but also look at what China is doing in having 1,000 nuclear warheads by 2030, investing heavily in its navy. The quality of everything they're producing now at a level that is really comparable to what you're doing within NATO territory. And that is why we need to do the 3 things. Ukraine, 1, making sure that we spend more, considerably more, to make sure that we are able to defend ourselves also in 4 or 5 years. And we need to take those decisions this year. And 3, making sure that we have what we need to defend ourselves, and that is the defense industrial base. And the problem there is we have fantastic companies all over Europe and Turkey and Norway and the UK and in the US and in Canada, but they're not producing enough. they are not producing enough. And my expectation is, in 4 or 5 years, given all the money going around, the order books of Thalys and of Rheinmetall and Leonardo, but also Raytheon and Boeing and the big defense companies in Turkey, Norway, UK, they will be filled. But hopefully, they will also have put in place, and this is really crucial, the production lines and the shifts to make sure that we get the stuff sooner rather than later. Because otherwise, we have the money, but we can still not defend ourselves. So we need the two, plus we have to make sure Ukraine prevails.
Nos.
Thanks today, Dutch NOS, Secretary General. You started stating that you are in close contact, of course, with Trump's administration, meaning you are well informed. What then do you consider as a very unexpected, even bad news Pete Hegseth might come up with? And will you be surprised for these kind of prepared for these surprises?
Well, what the US is consistently doing, and this was Trump in his first term, it is again the present administration doing, is telling the European Canadian side of NATO, hey guys, you have to spend more. One, because we need it collectively to defend ourselves, and secondly, because if we spend more and we come closer to what the US is spending, or we come level with them, it means that where they are about half of NATO economy and the other 31 are the other half, that it is fair. And it is common sense to do that. I mean, it's clear that we have to do this. And then, of course, on defense production, we have a collective problem, not just Europe and Canada, but including the US, because they're also not producing enough. And by the way, we spend 4 times more in the US than they spend in Europe. So financially, it's also a good deal for the US, but okay, that's not for me to comment on, but I would think, hey, this is also financially very helpful. So we need the Americans to also ramp up defense production on their side, and they will get a lot of money out of that, as France, Germany and Italy and Turkey, Norway and the UK will get a lot of money out of it, because we need all these defense companies to do this. And then on Ukraine, we need to make sure that they get in the best possible place whenever talks will start. And this is what we are discussing together, also assessing the fact that these so-called theaters, the Euro-Atlantic and the Indo-Pacific, are more and more intertwined, because we know that North Korea, China are part of this, and a bad deal on Ukraine will be watched by Xi Jinping and the other senior leaders in Beijing, and it might give them some ideas on some of their strategic goals they want to pursue in the region.
All right. TVR Moldova.
Thank you. Vadim Keptanaru, Republic of Moldova, Secretary General. In an extremely important year, election year for the Republic of Moldova, Russia is diversifying and perfecting its arsenal of hybrid war in our country. So how far could Putin go, and what can stop him? And by the way, half an hour ago, another Russian drone fell down on our territory again. Thank you.
Well, first of all, maybe we should stop calling it hybrid, because hybrid sounds cuddly, nice, lovely. It is not. It is really state-sponsored sabotage, and in some cases even state-sponsored terrorism. And at least it is destabilizing, trying to destabilize Moldova and the rest of Europe, Canada and the US. And as I said in my short introduction, this includes assassination attempts, jamming airplanes, what you're experiencing in Moldova, but also attacks on the National Health Service in the UK, and there are many examples. And this is why I'm so glad that as NATO, where we used to assess what was happening, we are now much more active in reacting to it together with our allies. Take Baltic Sentry. We brought together that whole activity thanks to General Cavoli under his responsibilities. We brought it together with allies in just 10 days. So the NATO system is able to do this fast. And we need to react to these type of so-called cyber attacks, these destabilizing activities much faster. And we will do that because we are not at war, we are not at peace either, as I said before, and this is one of the examples.
Kosovo TV.
Thank you. I'm Mehmet Krasniqi from Dugajini Television in Kosovo. Secretary General, can you comment on the recent elections in Kosovo and on the implication for the future relations between NATO and Kosovo? Thank you.
And of course, we follow what is happening in Kosovo keenly in Pristina, but of course this is a democratic process. My understanding is that there are initial results, but as far as I know, until today, not a final result. The Electoral Committee is will still report on the final results. And based on the initial results, it seems that there will be a coalition government. And of course, we will make sure that we will work with whoever is leading the country. And of course, we wish the Kosovar politicians well in navigating the political landscape and making sure that there is a stable government as soon as possible.
All right. Radio Free Europe.
Thank you. Secretary General Olena Abramovich, Ukrainian Service of Radio Free Europe. If I may just quick follow-up on the question of my colleagues. So you mentioned in Davos that if US decides to continue support for Ukraine, Europe should cover the bill. Could you please specify, does it mean completely cover the bill or partly cover the bill, and how does it how do you going to ramp up the production inside and also spend much more money on American weapons for Ukraine? Thank you.
Yeah, I think there are a couple of issues in your question. One, of course, is to make sure that the stuff is there. The military support is there. And in many cases, it comes out of our stockpiles. Sometimes you can order it from the defense industry, but obviously then it is not available and ready the next day. And we know that Ukraine itself has a really impressive defense industrial base. And we know that Lithuania and Denmark, with other countries, Canada and others are involved. You have opened your defense industrial base for NATO allies to buy there and then procure from that and then to deliver it into Ukraine, which is also helping your economy. So that is the issue of how to get the stuff to Ukraine you need. And then and who will pay for this? It is my assumption that there will be more of a pressure on European allies to step up in terms of also the financial bill. That's my assumption.
BBC Russia.
Hi, my name is Elizaveta Fok from the BBC Russian service. Thank you for this opportunity. I wanted to ask you that given recent reports that communications between Moscow and Washington, specifically regarding the war in Ukraine, have significantly intensified, do you believe that NATO as an institution should maybe initiate a direct dialogue with Russia on the matter? What is the level of communication is right now? And additionally, is there a risk, you think, that such close engagement between White House and Moscow, and we're seeing some mixed messages coming out of this conversation, can marginalize other NATO allies in discussions concerning Ukraine and European security? Thank you.
Yeah, well, when there are contacts between the US and Russia, NATO is more than 50% US. So in that sense, this alliance, the one ally is over 50% in terms of its economic power of this alliance. So in that sense, I'm not worried if there are contacts because we are all collectively involved within this alliance. But as I said before, I'm not going to speculate about whatever talks are ongoing and who should do what. We really have to keep the eye on the ball. And the eye on the ball means that we have to know the two goals we have. One is to make sure that we change the trajectory, what is happening in Ukraine, and make sure that they are in the best possible position whenever talks will start. But we also have to make sure that whenever they are concluded, that the outcome is there to stay. Will not be challenged by Putin half a year or 2 years later, like what happened with Crimea.
Rustavi 2.
I changed my work. I'm Euroscope now, but from Georgia. Of course, NATO is a military organization, but in the same time, political organization based on common values. In this case, how do you see, what's your estimation about recent developments in aspirant country, Georgia? I want to now stress on my colleague Mzia Maglobeli's case. She's on a hunger strike, more than 1 month in a jail? And finally, also, how do you see future and recent cooperation between NATO and Georgia militarily? Thank you.
I have already commented before on the outcome of the Georgian elections and also on our wish, of course, for Georgia to stay on a path towards NATO, towards the European Union, in line with our values of democracy and the rule of law and human rights. But I think I should refrain from doing that every time again, because I did already. And obviously we are closely following what's happening in Georgia with some worry, you can be assured.
All right. Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung.
Thanks a lot. Thomas Gutschka, Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung. Secretary General, 2 questions, please. The first one, this morning, the new US Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, said on X when he entered, or after he entered the building, that NATO needs to become stronger and more lethal. How do you read this more lethal part? What would it imply in practice? And the second question, you mentioned yourself that this threshold north of 3% that you've given in the European Parliament a few weeks ago. What would be a realistic time frame for reaching a new defense investment pledge? And what is the reactions, the feedback you have received from allies so far on this?
Well, first on lethal, he is totally right. NATO has to be a lethal organization, otherwise we cannot keep the deterrence going. And that's crucial. And as we discussed before, we have seen the rearmament of Russia and the threat that is posing. Yeah? Your colleague was just asking that question from Echo News Agency. Unfortunately now in exile. So it is crucial that Russia's rearmament is met by us, and that our mindset has to be that we are willing to protect every inch of NATO territory, and we will. Not only now, and this is my plea, not only now but also in the future. And this comes to your second question. That means that if we would stick to the 2%, we cannot defend ourselves in 4 or 5 years. We have to spend more, and not because I want some new target, but because when you look at what we are doing now, allies have asked us to do this. We do this together with allies, assessing the gaps we have between where we are and where we should be to defend ourselves in 4 or 5 years. They are simply too big, those gaps, to be filled by 2%. You will end up considerably north of 3, is my assumption at the moment. We'll see later exactly what that number should be, and of course including the timeline. I'm not going to speculate now about the timeline, but again, I would say rather sooner than later, and it has to be a credible timeline, so no repeat of what we did in 2014, committing to 2% and then nothing happened for the first couple of years. That's simply unacceptable, and not because only Donald Trump, President Trump is asking us to do this, but because we have to defend ourselves. 1 billion people, to keep them safe. That's why we need to do that. And obviously, when I discuss this with political leaders, there's always the emotion and the ratio. So rationally, they see the argument. But at the same time, of course, when you're a politician, you have to make your choices in scarcity. And that means that you have to take decisions at the national level to make sure that the money is there, which is not always easy. But still, it needs to be done. And I think the large majority of political leaders understand that.
All right, we have time for one more question. Anadolu.
Turkish news agency Anadolu, Selen Valente. As you mentioned several times now, considering Turkey's defense capabilities that you witnessed during your visit to Ankara recently, what messages will you convey to the allied ministers about the role that Turkey can play for empowering the alliance's defense industry, in particular Europe's, as well as for achieving peace in Ukraine in the light of the fact that the new US administration is pushing for that? Thank you.
Can I say that the Turkish defense industrial base is really impressive. There are a couple of hundred organizations working on the innovation side. There are a couple of thousand companies involved, part of the secretariat, the Turkish secretariat for the defense industry. I met in Ankara, but he also visited me here the chief of that agency, directly reporting into the president, into President Erdogan's office. So that is really important. And I know there is a close cooperation between what you are doing in Turkey with other allies all over Europe and with the US. And you are really supplying some of the most important parts and sometimes end products in terms of what the Turkish industry is producing. And we can only ask you to do more, whatever you can do in Turkey to ramp it up, to do more, to have even more shifts and more production lines. My prediction is in 4 or 5 years you will see them all filled to max capacity because the money is there. And the same goes for Naval and Thales in France and for Leonardo in Italy and for Rheinmetall in Germany and for all the BAE in the UK and all the other proud defense industry companies in Europe and Raytheon and Boeing and Lockheed Martin and all the other companies in the US. We really have to do that. So let's not discuss too much what we need to do in terms of stimulating that defense industry. No, tell them the money is there, produce, 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 and make sure that we stay safe here. Thank you.
All right, thank you everyone. We'll see you tomorrow afternoon after the ministerial.
Till then.
Okay. Ouais, pas de souci, pas de problème. Ouais, ça va, super, merci pour ta compréhension.
Morning. Should I have this one? Good morning, everybody. So it will be 2 very intensive days. We start with Ukraine tomorrow about the NATO. Of course, we will wait what the Secretary Hexet will say. It is important. But when we talk about Ukraine, then for us it is very important that we understand where we stand at. So we see that Ukrainians are starting to push again with the counteroffensive. They've been a bit successful, but we also understand that we need to increase our military aid. It's good to see that 10 countries are already investing at least 0.25% of GDP to Ukrainian defense. This is what has been said by Estonia for a long time already, and we will continue also. Last year, we know that we agreed in Washington to help Ukraine with 40 billion. It was achieved even more, so 50 billion was given to Ukraine as military aid. It's good, but we also know that it's not enough. So we need to continue with that. Of course, we'll see what will be the message also from the United States regarding the future of Ramstein. Can we continue with this format in this way as we have done that for the last 3 years? Because the 4th year of the war starts in a couple of days. So it is important to understand that. Regarding the NATO, also we are preparing the Hague Summit. For us, it is important that we will talk about the defense pledge, that we will talk about that how much do we spend. Estonia spends next year 3.7. We are discussing even moving above 4%, maybe even more. So it is important to understand that defense investments are important and then to agree on the capability targets. So these are the main topics. I'm open for the questions.
What do you expect to hear from Secretary Hexet today?
Well, first of all, of course, as we are talking about today in the Ramstein format, then today I would like to see what his stand on the future of Ramstein. That do we understand collectively that this format helps Ukraine closer to the victory? So this is first. Secondly, of course, to understand in more general way what is the US approach towards Ukraine. And regarding tomorrow, let's see, because for us it is very important that we understand also that we are defending NATO and defending the countries together. So we are together in this endeavor, and then we try to continue.
Fairly surprised you might bring.
To be more lethal, is that compatible with a defensive alliance? What is your sense on that?
We've said that all the time, that when we take also the new defense plans and capability targets, then we all understand that when we want to have more capabilities, when we want to deter Russia, then we need to invest more also into lethality. So we need to have these capabilities. It's not only about defensive capabilities. It's not only about the air defense. It's also offensive capabilities, because this is the only way how we can deter Russia.
Talking with President Putin about possible peace deal in Ukraine. How high do you see the risk that European allies will be sidelined in this kind of negotiations?
Well, I've been always in the position that there will be no peace in Ukraine without Ukraine. So this is the first determinant that the Ukrainians have to be ready for this. But to give Ukrainians the chance to go to negotiation table, they need to have strong hands. They don't have today, or they are not today in this position. So this is why first I would like to hear, and I would like to talk about the military aid, about that, what we will do, and also Estonia will contribute this year at least 0.25% of our GDP. So, and then when we would all do that, then this would still give more than 100 billion. And this would be also the message for Russia that we are backing Ukraine today, tomorrow, and day after.
Do you think Europe can support Ukraine even without the US?
Sorry?
Do you think Europe can support Ukraine without the US?
We are doing that. As I said, last year, Europe, together with Canada, did 60% of the aid we sent to Ukraine. So 60% from Europe and Canada, 40% from the United States. In total, 50 billions. So we are able to continue that. And of course, we are discussing also that when we don't have much maybe to take from the stockpiles, then we should also look at this, that we are helping Ukrainian industry, because they have more capacity as they have and capabilities to produce something than they have the money at the moment.
Could they do 100%?
Yeah.
We will have a clearer outline of the US peace plan for Ukraine at the Munich Security Conference or afterwards when the Kellogg visits Kiev? Do you think we will have more clarity then?
Well, one thing I believe is that it will be not decided by Keith Kellogg. He probably will give his options, and the end result still has to come from President Zelensky and other leaders. So it's for Kellogg, it's about the options, it's about the negotiations, it's about testing the boundaries. And then we can talk about that. So, but I'm not very confident that we will hear either here or in Munich some concrete plans.
What signal does it send that the Americans didn't take over the Ukraine contact group? What do you think about that?
Again, let's wait. We knew that there will be an interim meeting, which is today. So the UK will lead today's meeting, and then probably Secretary Hexet will say very clear stand what will be the future of Ramstein, also from the US position.
You don't expect to hear today or in Munich on the US position. When do you expect to hear it?
Well, I said about the peace plan. The question was about the peace plan. So this is probably not the question for today. So it's about the coming days and weeks. But first of all and foremost, I would like to talk about military assistance to Ukraine, because this helps Ukraine closer to the victory. But we have some other colleagues waiting for you. So thank you very much.
Ja, schönen guten Morgen, meine Damen und Herren. Ich freue mich, Sie zu sehen. Heute das nächste Treffen der Ukraine-Kontaktgruppe unter neuen Vorzeichen mit einer neuen US-Administration. Das Ziel ist klar, wir wollen unverändert und halten daran fest, dass die Ukraine aus einer Position der Stärke heraus agieren kann. Und erstmals wird heute auch unser neuer US-Kollege dabei sein, Pete Hexet. Wir wollen als NATO-Partner für die Ukraine-Unterstützung alles tun, dass die fortgeführt wird. Das ist in unserem gemeinsamen transatlantischen und internationalen Interesse. Und um das zu erreichen, haben wir insbesondere aus Deutschland heraus nochmal unsere Kooperation im Bereich Joint Venture mit der ukrainischen Rüstungsindustrie verstärkt. Wir haben darüber in der Group of Five gesprochen, auch gerade nochmal in einem kurzen Treffen. Und ich habe darüber, das wissen Sie ja, diese Group of Five, initiiert mit meinem französischen Kollegen Sébastien Lecornu im November. Heute haben wir uns wieder getroffen und haben eben genau über diese Fragen gesprochen. Es geht um Joint Venture bei der Instandsetzung und Wartung von Schützen und Kampfpanzern. Es geht um die Einsatzbereitschaft der Leopard 1 Panzer, der Marder-Panzer. Es geht um Drohnen. Auch hier sind wir mit einem deutlichen Schritt vorangekommen, was die Produktion hier im Land angeht. Und wir stärken damit, und das ist entscheidend für die Zeit, die vor uns liegt, die industrielle Basis der Rüstungsindustrie in der Ukraine. Die kurzen Wege zur Produktion und zur Instandsetzung sorgen eben dafür, dass die ukrainischen Streitkräfte schneller an das einsatzbereite Material kommen, schneller nachbeschaffen können. Und gleichzeitig, und das ist für beide Seiten von Bedeutung, fördern wir durch den Know-how-Transfer zwischen unserer und der ukrainischen Rüstungsindustrie das, was wir verbessern können an unserem System, auch jetzt schon zum Nutzen der Ukraine. Wir profitieren also wechselseitig. Zu all diesen Fragen und zu anderen habe ich mich eben auch eine Dreiviertelstunde ausgetauscht mit meinem Kollegen Pete Hexet. Wir wollen an der engen, verlässlichen transatlantischen Freundschaft und Partnerschaft festhalten. Wir haben uns über einige Dinge ausgetauscht, auch was die NATO-Fragen und die Ukraine angeht. Denn wir beide wissen und andere natürlich auch, das ist ein wichtiges Jahr für die Ukraine in diesem furchtbaren Krieg, in dem sie sich erwehren müssen. Insgesamt ein sehr freundliches, ein sehr offenes Gespräch. Ich freue mich auf die Zusammenarbeit.
Steht eigentlich im Raum. Ist das für Deutschland machbar?
Das 5%-Ziel steht nicht im Raum. Es gibt eine Forderung des amerikanischen Präsidenten. Es müssen 5% sein. Die Amerikaner sind selbst noch sehr, sehr weit davon entfernt. Alle sind sich darüber einig. Das ist mein Eindruck. Es geht vor allen Dingen darum, die NATO-Fähigkeitsziele zu erfüllen, die in diesem Sommer festgelegt werden, einmütig. Die müssen dann in der vorgegebenen Zeit und in der Menge erfüllt werden. Das ist Aufgabe jedes NATO-Mitgliedslandes und damit auch von Deutschland. Dass wir über deutlich mehr als 2% reden, ist nicht neu. Ob wir jetzt 3% oder 3,5% sagen, spielt fast schon keine Rolle. Entscheidend ist, es muss einen deutlichen, kontinuierlichen Aufwuchs geben. Oder so wie ich es immer nenne, wir brauchen einen Plan für Security Next Generation. Also was passiert in den nächsten Jahren kontinuierlich, nachhaltig und planvoll, damit die Abwehrfähigkeit, damit die Abschreckungsfähigkeit der Bundeswehr, der Bundesrepublik Deutschland als größter NATO-Partner und des Bündnisses insgesamt gewährleistet bleibt.
Alle Berechnungen hat ja kürzlich schon Kontakt mit Präsident Putin über mögliche friedliche Lösungen im Ukraine-Krieg. Wie hoch schätzen Sie das Risiko ein, dass die europäischen Verbündeten Zaungäste werden bei möglichen Friedensverhandlungen?
Sehr gering.
What would you like to hear from Secretary Hegseth this afternoon? What do you expect? What would you like to hear from Secretary Hegseth this afternoon?
No, I already met him half an hour ago. I talked to him for more than 40 minutes, something like that. It was a very frank and honest and friendly talk we had, and we discussed among our delegations and afterwards among the two of us what we expect in the months and years to come. What are the obligations we have to face, and what is the future of our cooperation? It was a very, very fruitful talk.
Minister, what do you think? Alle Berechnungen zeigen, dass wenn Deutschland die Fähigkeitsziele der NATO erreichen will, die momentan im Gespräch sind, dass dann deutlich mehr als 3% der Wirtschaftsleistung für Verteidigung ausgegeben werden müssten. Ist man sich dessen in der Bundesregierung wirklich bewusst und ab wann können aus Ihrer Sicht 3% ausgegeben werden?
Also meine Position war immer sehr klar, es muss das für Verteidigung und Abschreckung ausgegeben werden, was notwendig ist, weil ohne Sicherheit alle anderen Politikbereiche deutlich, wie soll ich sagen, zurückstehen. Wenn wir nicht in Sicherheit leben können, und dazu gehört, abschreckungs- und verteidigungsfähig zu sein, dann geht uns eine Menge verloren. Dieses muss uns auch entsprechend Geld und Aufwand wert sein. Und wir werden sehen, wie schnell sich das nach der Bundestagswahl dann rüttelt. Aber klar muss sein, wir müssen uns ehrlich machen an dieser Stelle. Es wird nicht mit 2 oder 2,5% funktionieren. Entscheidend ist, und ich kann das nur wiederholen, ob es dann 3,5% sind, um die NATO-Fähigkeitsziele zu erreichen, ist eine Sache. Entscheidend ist, selbst das wird nicht in einem Jahr reichen, sondern es muss kontinuierlich so sein, dass die Beschaffungsprojekte, die nun mal in vielen Bereichen über mehrere Jahre laufen, abgebildet werden können und gewissermaßen unabhängig gemacht werden können davon, was ansonsten jeweils politisch diskutiert wird.
Wie soll das aus Ihrer Sicht finanziert werden?
Das ist ja völlig eindeutig. Also wer sich den Haushalt anguckt, wer sich anguckt, die Zahlen, über die wir reden, nehmen wir mal 3%, dann reden wir, wenn wir 3% als Ausgangspunkt nehmen, dann bei 3% reden wir nach heutigem BIP von rund 120 Milliarden Euro pro Jahr. Das sind ungefähr 65 bis 68 Milliarden Euro mehr, als heute im Haushalt stehen, ohne ein Sondervermögen. Und darüber müssen wir uns im Klaren sein, dass ein solcher Betrag nicht, wie soll ich sagen, herausgeschnitten werden kann aus einem Gesamtetat. Bundeshaushalt 480 Milliarden Euro muss jedem klar sein. Deswegen schon seit langer Zeit mein Appell, meine Forderung, wenn Sie so wollen, Verteidigung und Sicherheit muss ausgeklammert werden aus der Schuldenbremse, weil wir uns sonst im Klein-Klein der Diskussion über die Ausgaben in verschiedenen Politikfeldern verlieren und dann am Ende soziale Sicherheit, Bildung und anderes ausgespielt werden gegen Sicherheit nach außen. Und das darf nicht passieren.
On Syria, President Emmanuel Macron said, we want to make sure the Kurds are safe and the Kurds they have the right. And because the Kurd fighters, before they fight against Daesh Yantal right now with the ally, do you think he's right?
As you know, I went to Iraq and Kurdistan last year, and I'm absolutely clear and committed to our engagement in that region together with the US, and I hope that we will find a solution to prolong our engagement together with the US and other partners in the region, because this is crucial for security, especially now after the changes in Syria.
Könnten Sie bitte nochmals deutlicher ausführen, warum Sie glauben, dass die Europäer bei den Friedensverhandlungen eine Rolle spielen würden?
Weil alle wissen, welche Rolle Europa spielt, auch bei einer Friedenssicherung.
Hat heute eine schnellere und tödlichere Allianz verlangt.
Eine tödlichere?
Ja, more lethal, hat er gesagt. Wie deuten Sie das? Passt das zur Verteidigungsallianz NATO aus Ihrer Sicht?
Naja, ich muss ja jetzt nicht den Sprachgebrauch meiner Kollegen zu eigen machen, aber klar ist, das Prinzip von Abschreckung heißt, ich muss in der Lage sein, als Deutschland, als Bundeswehr im Verbund mit den NATO-Partnern einen Krieg zu führen, der uns aufgezwungen wird. Und dann geht es genau um diese Fragestellung. Wir müssen schnell aufwuchsfähig sein, wir müssen die richtige Ausstattung haben und wir müssen in der Lage sein, das zu tun, was in einem Krieg dann nötig ist. Okay?
Europäische Schulden für Verteidigung aus Ihrer persönlichen Sicht?
Also wir haben europäische Verträge, die sehr klar regeln, dass Verteidigung Sache der Nationalstaaten ist. Und daran wird sich nach meiner Einschätzung auch auf Sicht nichts ändern. Worüber man sicherlich nachdenken kann, sind Bürgschaften der Europäischen Zentralbank. Aber das ist nicht meine Entscheidung, nicht mein Politikfeld. Aber klar muss sein, dass wir alle gemeinsam und jeder für sich in Europa, in der NATO, seine Aufgaben für Verteidigung erfüllen muss.
How do you see the possibilities for cooperation between, like, in NATO, with US?
I'm absolutely optimistic. We'll find solutions and answers to all questions we face. Both of us know that the NATO alliance, the transatlantic partnership, has been a guarantee for security and peace in the Western world and beyond. And both of us are strongly interested in keeping that running. Thank you.
Guarantees on Ukraine support?
No. Thank you.
I'll speak in Greek. Συνεδριάζει σήμερα το Συμβούλιο Υπουργών του ΝΑΤΟ με θέμα την Ουκρανία. Είναι το πρώτο συμβούλιο στο οποίο παρίσταται ο νέος Αμερικανός Υπουργός, ο Πιτ Χέγκεσετ. Είναι πολύ ενδιαφέρον να ακούσουμε τις θέσεις του, όμως θα ήθελα να παρατηρήσω ότι δεν θα προεδρεύσει σήμερα ο Αμερικανός Υπουργός, αντίθετα θα προεδρεύσει ο Άγγλος Υπουργός, ο Τζον Χίλι. Επαναλαμβάνω, έχει μεγάλη σημασία να δούμε τις θέσεις της νέας κυβέρνησης των ΗΠΑ στο θέμα της Ουκρανίας. Από εκεί και πέρα θέλω να θυμίσω κάτι άλλο, που έχει να κάνει με τις νατοικές ασκήσεις. Το ΝΑΤΟ είναι πάντοτε μια συμμαχία αξιών και όλες οι ασκήσεις σχεδιάζονται με απόλυτο σεβασμό στην κυριαρχία και τα κυριαρχικά δικαιώματα όλων των χωρών μελών. Άλλος τρόπος και άλλη προσέγγιση δεν υπάρχει και δεν συγχωρείται. Ευχαριστώ πολύ.
Hello everyone. Today is an important meeting of instrumental platform. Ramstein format is very imperative to continue supporting Ukraine. In sense of principles, certainly it must be underlined that we should negotiate and act from positions of strengths. So if we speak about any peace, so it means that peace through strengths, but it's also, of course, about the practical steps. So practical steps forward in terms of financial support, in terms of military support, in terms of strategic support to Ukraine. Latvia has contributed last year more than 0.25% from our GDP militarily supporting Ukraine. And also now we continue with that support, at least 0.25% also this year. We being top 3 countries supporting Ukraine. Now we come with new donations. We will announce about a donation of 42 armed personnel carriers, which is a battalion size donation. We continue co-leading the drone coalition, as well as there are additional commitments to support with financial support, but also with specific numbers of drones this year. And of course, continuous importance of training for Ukrainian soldiers. So once more, in principle, peace through strength, but with very practical steps now coming this year as well.
What do you wish from the new US administration in regards to NATO politics?
Well, we must be united. We are a community of like-minded. We realize what is a common threat. I think there is an understanding of this common threat. So the threat assessment is always important to base our policies and already practically implement them. Of course, I expect also that new administration has already underlined the importance of military spending, that we supporting Ukraine, also donating, investing in our own defense and deterrence absolutely is crucial. Again, I can underline Latvia this year invests almost 5%, 3.45. Next year will be already closer to 4%. We believe that investment in our defense and our deterrence is absolutely crucial. So I think we do our homework, but of course we invite also other members of the transatlantic community to do the same. So it is very important in these times, both supporting our own defenses, but at the same time supporting Ukraine as well.
Can Europe support Ukraine without the US, though?
I think that US support is indispensable. It is crucial. Yes, Europeans have to do, we as Europeans have to do our homework. We have to, of course, invest as a fair burden sharing, both again in our own defenses and also supporting Ukraine. So we believe that this support, taking into account that there is common threat assessment, it will continue also from US side. So of course, from our side, the motivating encouragement will come that it is a common joint mission to support Ukraine, because at the very end it's about repercussions, implications for international global order, which benefits all like-minded community countries, including the United States.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Have a nice day. Bye-bye. Thank you. Yes, please.
Hi. Oekraïne. Nee, vandaag is een hele belangrijke bijeenkomst, juist omdat we samen met al onze partners en bondgenoten willen blijven werken natuurlijk aan steun aan Oekraïne. Oekraïne, het is op dit moment zwaar op het slagveld, dus ze hebben onze steun onverminderd hard nodig. Daar hebben wij als Nederland altijd een voortrekkersrol in gespeeld, samen met andere landen. En dat zullen we moeten blijven doen, want alleen door kracht kunnen we vrede bereiken. En het tegenovergestelde is ook waar. Als we zwakte tonen, dan leidt dat tot meer Russische agressie en meer oorlog.
De vorige Amerikaanse regering heeft heel veel gedaan voor Oekraïne. Wat verwacht u van de nieuwe Amerikaanse regering? Heeft u signalen dat ze met nieuwe steunpakketten komen? Of ja, wordt het onderhandelen en daar blijft het bij?
Nou, we zien op dit moment dat er heel veel Amerikaanse steun nog richting Oekraïne gaat. Net zo goed als dat ook vanuit Nederland en heel veel andere landen gaat. En we zullen zo meteen natuurlijk horen wat de Amerikaanse regering en de nieuwe minister van Defensie, wat van hen de inzet wordt. Maar in de gesprekken die we tot nu toe hebben gezien, is heel duidelijk dat zij ook het belang zien natuurlijk van stevige inzet. Omdat zij ook wel zien dat als je zwakte laat zien tegenover Rusland, verdeeldheid laat zien tegenover Rusland, dat dat alleen maar tot grotere problemen leidt.
Wat heeft u vandaag te bieden voor Oekraïne?
Nou ja, wij gaan onverminderd door met de steun zoals we die al jaren geven. Onlangs hebben we weer F-16's geleverd die op dit moment in het Oekraïense luchtruim vliegen. Daar ook een belangrijke bijdrage leveren, want gisteren en vandaag zagen we weer grote luchtaanvallen. We leveren ook doorlopend ander materieel, ook weer pantservoertuigen om gewonden af te kunnen voeren. Bijvoorbeeld is weer een belangrijke bijdrage die we zullen aankondigen, 25 pantservoertuigen. En zo zijn er tal van andere zaken waaraan we blijven werken. Bijvoorbeeld ons actieplan drones van honderden miljoenen. En waarbij we drones verder blijven ontwikkelen om ook bijvoorbeeld deep strike capaciteiten om die te versterken. Want Oekraïne heeft zowel op het slagveld hebben ze veel meer wapens nodig, maar ook om dieper Rusland te kunnen raken om aanvoerlijnen te treffen.
Minister Brekelmans, ik neem aan dat u ook wat onderzoek heeft gedaan naar uw nieuwe Amerikaanse collega. Wat is uw indruk van de voormalige Fox-presentator Hexer?
Nou, we hebben op dezelfde universiteit gestudeerd, dus dat schept sowieso een band. Nee, ik ken elkaar niet. We zijn elkaar net misgelopen. Toen hij afstudeerde, toen ging ik daar naartoe. Dus we zijn elkaar in die zin hebben elkaar niet ontmoet. Maar ik heb gezien dat hij van plan is om het Amerikaanse leger te versterken. Dat hij dat ook van belangrijk vindt. Dat uiteindelijk is een krijgsmacht ervoor bedoeld om te kunnen vechten. En dat hij ook de defensieindustrie een belangrijke prioriteit vindt. En vooral dat laatste, dat is ook iets wat voor mij heel erg belangrijk is. Dus ik zie tal van mogelijkheden om goed te kunnen samenwerken.
Wat was uw belangrijkste boodschap aan hem als u hem straks ontmoet?
Nou, dat wij als Nederland een partner zijn waarop je kunt rekenen. Dat geldt zowel voor de steun aan Oekraïne natuurlijk, waarin we voorop lopen. En dat zal ik ook nader natuurlijk nog illustreren hoe wij dat doen. Bijvoorbeeld als het gaat om de F-16's, waarin we dat heel nauw met de Verenigde Staten samen doen. Als wanneer het gaat om het versterken van de NAVO en wat daarvoor nodig is. Bijvoorbeeld op de defensieindustrie. Wij kopen jaarlijks meer dan 1 miljard aan materieel kopen we in de Verenigde Staten. En dat is illustratief eigenlijk voor hoe hecht onze band is. En wat mij betreft is dat een relatie die we verder versterken en verder op voortbouwen.
Kan u ook op Nederland rekenen om het defensiebudget op te schroeven naar 5%?
Nou, we hebben natuurlijk gezegd dat 2% dat voor ons een absoluut minimum is. En dat wij dat als een minimum definiëren, zelfs straks in de wetgeving, dat is niet voor niks. Omdat we er altijd van uitgaan, wat is de dreiging die op ons afkomt? Wat is daarvoor nodig om ons tegen te beschermen? En dat we daar niet te veel risico's mee moeten nemen. Dus wij zijn bereid natuurlijk om te kijken naar ook hogere uitgaven dan die 2%. We hebben het niet voor niks als een minimum gedefinieerd. En we zullen zien hoe verschillende landen daarin staan.
Hoe realistisch is zo'n openingsbod?
We gaan nog maandenlang, zullen we hier waarschijnlijk over spreken richting de NAVO-top in Den Haag. Wat natuurlijk voor mij ook belangrijk is, omdat vandaag nog eens te benadrukken dat we de komende maanden dat die ook in aanloop staan naar die belangrijke NAVO-top in ons land. Dus er heel veel tijd om de landen die daar verschillend over denken en een verschillend openingsbod, zoals u zegt, hebben, om die de komende tijd bij elkaar te brengen. En ik denk dat dat het allerbelangrijkste is, want wij moeten eenheid en kracht uitstralen. En onze vijanden en tegenstanders die willen juist verdeeldheid zaaien. En daar moeten ze niet bij helpen.
In voorbereiding op die de top in Den Haag, heeft u nog een 1-op-1 met uw Amerikaanse collega?
Ik hoop het. We zullen het gaan kijken. Ik hoop hem natuurlijk vandaag en morgen 1-op-1 te spreken. Maar hij is net begonnen, dus we zijn nog aan het plannen.
U heeft dat verzoek wel ingediend bij de Amerikanen?
Wij willen uiteraard altijd met onze Amerikaanse collega's, zodra ze zijn geïnstalleerd, willen ze spreken.
Gaat u hem dan ook aanspreken op de gevraagde uitspraken die hij gedaan heeft, waar hij ook voor achtervolgd is door de media in ieder geval in Amerika? Hij houdt niet van woke, hij wil geen diversiteit in het leger, daar is hij later weer op teruggekomen. Zijn dat dingen waar u hem dan op zou aanspreken?
Ik ga hem daar niet op het verleden aanspreken, op uitspraken uit het verleden, tweets uit het verleden. Volgens mij moeten wij vooral vooruitkijken. En hij heeft nu de functie als minister van Defensie. Daar kijk ik naar uit om heel nauw en intensief met hem daarop samen te werken. En dat is vooral waar ik het met hem wil hebben. Geen achterhoedegevechten over wat er in het verleden is gezegd.
On Syria. Hij drukt erop aan dat de NAVO meer lethal wordt, meer dodelijk. Is dat taal waarmee u uit de voeten kunt? Hoe valt u dat op? Hoe ziet u dat voor zich?
Nou, ik denk dat hij vooral bedoelt dat het meer moet gaan om gevechtskracht. En dat is ook als je kijkt naar de agenda die wij in Nederland hebben. Wij investeren ook miljarden in onze defensie. En dat doen we ook in alle domeinen om ervoor te zorgen dat we niet alleen het gevecht steviger kunnen voeren, maar dat we dat ook langer kunnen volhouden. En gegeven de dreigingen die op ons afkomen, die heel reëel zijn, is dat, lijkt mij, een hele realistische agenda. Dus ik snap heel goed dat hij ook zegt van ik wil de gevechtskracht van het Amerikaanse leger, gegeven alle dreigingen die er in de wereld zijn, die zullen we moeten vergroten.
Vindt u ook dat er te veel vergaderd is de afgelopen jaren?
Vergaderingen horen erbij, daarom ben ik hier vandaag ook. Maar uiteindelijk moet het resulteren in wat ben je in staat om op de mat te leggen. Dat is uiteindelijk bottom line waar het om draait. En daar moet onze focus ook op gericht zijn. En ik vind bijvoorbeeld, als het gaat om de defensieindustrie, zeg ik zelf ook steeds, we lopen al eindeloos dezelfde discussie met elkaar te voeren. En er moeten eens knopen worden doorgehakt, want we hebben gewoon meer spullen nodig.
On Syria.
Yeah, so I think it's very important that we, of course, discuss the support to Ukraine, because we see that it's quite heavy on the battlefield and that Ukraine is fighting a fierce battle every day. So we saw also new waves of air attacks, both yesterday and today. So we need to make sure that we continue our support to Ukraine, because in the end, the only way to peace is through strength. The opposite is true as well. If we show weakness, then Russian aggression and the war will continue. So I think that's the first priority, to make sure that we keep supporting Ukraine, that we stand strong, that we stand together. And we know that the United States, of course, is of fundamental importance for this. And I look forward to further cooperate in this respect.
Can you support Ukraine without the US?
New administration, and there is the new president. Emmanuel Macron, president of France, he said, we want to be sure the Kurds are safe and they have their right. And what message do you have for the President Ahmad Shara, new president of Syria?
So I think it is important that there is stability, of course, in Syria and also in the wider region. I think we are now opening up new contacts with with al-Shara. Of course, some fundamental values are important to us, and if also he himself and also others, if they are willing to not violate those values, then of course it makes it easier for us to cooperate. But I think there are many interests that we share. We, as the Netherlands, for example, we are also active in Iraq. We have been active there for a long time, because we want to create stability in the region. We want to make sure that there is no terrorism. We want to prevent irregular migration flows. Those are very important interests also to us. Of course, Syria hasn't, Assad regime hasn't been a partner in that respect, as an understatement, to say it as an understatement. And hopefully we can work together with al-Sharaa to pursue our joint interests.
Have you spoken with the Kurdish Authority in Syria?
Not in Syria, no. I recently visited Iraq, and I also went to the Kurdish autonomous region there, and I spoke to the president and also to others, but not in Syria yet.
And what's the conclusion, the result? You are meeting with the Kurdish Authority in the Kurdistan region.
That it is important also for the Netherlands to remain engaged and to support, because, of course, given what's happening in Syria, also some unrest and also some threat from ISIL, for example, could spill over to Iraq. So that's why our continued presence remains important in Iraq, and I also told him and others that we are working very hard to help Iraq, and that we will continue to do that in the future. Okay.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. We're having an important meeting, Ukraine Assistant Group. UK is taking the leadership, and we highly appreciate that this group is still continuing its support. We also see that now it's the right time to increase the support to Ukraine, to show Russia, China, North Korea, Iran that the Western countries are not ramping down the support, even we are ramping up the support. So that's why also Finland is now increasing the support and giving hard defense packages to Ukraine.
Millaista viestiä odotatte Yhdysvaltain uudelta puolustusministeriltä Hegsetiltä näissä tapaamisissa tänään ja huomenna?
Erittäin mielenkiintoinen. USA:n hallinnon asento tietysti vaikuttaa paljon siihen, että miten Ukrainan tuen kokonaisuuden järjestelyt käy, mutta on luottavainen siihen, että USA myös ymmärtää tämän yhteisen tuen Euroopan ja USA:n osalta, että sillä on merkitys myös tälle Venäjän ja heidän liittolaistensa laajemmallekin toiminnalle. Uskon, että näin on, mutta kokouksen jälkeen ollaan viisaampia.
Eikö nyt ole selvää, että Natossa pitää varautua jo aiemmista puheista korkeampiin puolustusmenokeskusteluihin? Ja toiseksi, mitä odotatte tältä Yhdysvaltain puolustusministerin tapaamiselta? Minkä viestin aiotte viedä hänelle?
Meillä on huomenna tarkemmin sitten NATO-ministerikokouksessa tämä taakanjakokeskustelu, eli puolustusmenotasokeskustelu ja myös sitten keskustelu huomenna iltapäivän päätteeksi sitten USA:n puolustusministerin kanssa kahdenvälisesti. Ja sen jälkeen ollaan sitten tietysti viisaampia sen asian osalta. Sen verran voi sanoa, että tämä Ukrainan tuen kokonaisuus liittyy hyvin olennaisesti NATO-maiden puolustusmenotasoon jatkossa. Eli nämä kulkee käsi kädessä, koska molemmat nostaa Euroopan puolustusteollisuuden tasoa ja molemmissa käytetään käytössä puolustuksen resursseja.
What do you want to hear from the new US Secretary of Defense this afternoon?
Well, of course, we hope that the US is also supporting Ukraine in the longer term, and now we are seeing what is the point of view about that. We hope that they will continue the support, but still European countries must do much more in supporting Ukraine. And the European Union is also in a key place now because the European industry must be ramped up faster than has happened. So, well, we are seeing at the meeting what is happening.
Can you support Ukraine without the US?
Well, of course, Europe has to take a bigger role, but we need US with us here in this supporting packages. But I'm quite optimistic that the United States is still continuing to support.
How is the atmosphere among allies, knowing that you will meet the new US Secretary? And is it still a like-minded country, the USA?
Well, of course, USA is still a like-minded country, and we are at the same alliance. But there has been several years this debate on who is paying on defense, and are we paying in Europe enough? So in Finland, we are using 2.4% of GDP, and we have almost 900,000 reservists, and we are taking really serious our own defense, and we are a security provider and inputting much more capabilities also into NATO. So that's why we are also saying the same messages that Europe must do more. And I hope that this message towards Pentagon and Trump government is also the main point, that we must do more.
Pärjäisikö NATO ilman Yhdysvaltoja? Nyt tässä on ollut monenlaista keskustelua ja näyttää siltä, että yhteistyö on vähän rakoillut. Kuinka niin kuin olennaisen äärellä tässä ollaan?
Totta kai USA:lla on keskeinen rooli Natossa, Naton uskottavuudelle, mutta edelleenkin pitäisi jäitä hatussa siinä, että samoin kuin Trumpin hallinnon ensimmäisellä kaudella, niin käytiin samaa keskustelua. Euroopan maiden pitää vielä nopeammin ja enemmän käyttää puolustukseen resursseja ja hankkia puolustuskykyjä, lisää joukkoja ja sitten kalustoa. Ja me ollaan oikealla raiteella Naton kehittämisessä. Huomisessa kokouksessa siitä tulee enemmän. Sitten, mutta mä luulen, että jokainen maa varmaan tajuaa Euroopassa nyt niin kuin asian vakavuuden. Et nyt ei ole aikaa enää niin kuin juhlapuheille, vaan pitää saada konkreettisia toimenpiteitä aikaiseksi. Kiitoksia. Thank you all.
knopje niet dicht gaat, dan moet het niet dicht.
En een plastron is te kort. Dat zie ik. Een plastron is te kort.
Ja, 3 is...
Order, order. Good afternoon to you all. Let me welcome you all to the 26th meeting of the Ukraine Defence Contact Group. 46 nations and partners in the room this afternoon at 1 week's notice. Thank you for being here. Thank you for making yourself available. A coalition stretching from the Indo-Pacific to South America. And it's a pleasure to be joined by Secretary Hegseth, who confirmed to me this morning the US's continued commitment and involvement to the UDCG. Pete, we all wish you all success in your new job. Friends, we meet at a moment of great consequence. 2025 is the critical year for the war in Ukraine. Ukrainians continue to fight with huge courage, military and civilians alike. Their bravery, fused with our support, has proved a lethal combination. Putin believed he would win this war in 3 days. But now, nearly 3 years on, 850,000 Russians have been killed or wounded. But while Russia is weakened, it remains undeniably dangerous and is slowly taking ground. President Trump and President Zelensky have both spoken of their desire to achieve peace through strength. And it's the commitments here through this contact group that provide the strength to achieve that peace. And our job as defense ministers is to put into the hands of the Ukrainian war fighters what they need to fight and what they need to help force Putin to the negotiating table. At this crucial moment, we must step up further to strengthen Ukraine, to pressure Putin, to secure peace. And speaking as a European Defence Minister, we know our responsibilities. We are doing more of the heavy lifting, sharing more of the burden. Europe is stepping up with more defence spending and more support to Ukraine. For our part in the UK, we will spend £4.5 billion this year in military aid to support Ukraine, more than ever before. And by the end of March, both directly and working with our partners Latvia and other allies, we will have delivered over 10,000 drones in the last year alone. And today I've announced an extra £150 million in new firepower, tanks, artillery, air-to-air missiles, and new contracts for repairs to crucial kit in Ukraine. Ukraine's security matters to global security. This war was never just about the fate of one nation. China is watching. Iran and North Korea are watching. All, like Putin, are looking for signs of weakness, for our determination to fade, for our unity to fracture. And when aggression goes unchecked on one continent, it emboldens regimes on other continents. When the border of one country is redrawn by force, it undermines the security of all nations. So let us recognise this danger. Let us confront it with conviction and unity and secure peace through strength together. Now it gives me great pleasure to introduce the new US Defense Secretary, Secretary Hegseth.
Well, good afternoon, friends. Thank you, Secretary Healy, for your leadership, both in hosting and now leading the UDCG. This is my first Ukraine Defense Contact Group, and I'm honored to join all of you today. And I appreciate the opportunity to share President Trump's approach to the war in Ukraine. We are at, as you said, Mr. Secretary, a critical moment. As the war approaches its 3rd anniversary, our message is clear. The bloodshed must stop and this war must end. President Trump has been clear with the American people and with many of your leaders that stopping the fighting and reaching an enduring peace is a top priority. He intends to end this war by diplomacy and bringing both Russia and Ukraine to the table. And the U.S. Department of Defense will help achieve this goal. We will only end this devastating war and establish a durable peace by coupling allied strength with a realistic assessment of the battlefield. We want, like you, a sovereign and prosperous Ukraine. But we must start by recognizing that returning to Ukraine's pre-2014 borders is an unrealistic objective. Chasing this illusionary goal will only prolong the war and cause more suffering. A durable peace for Ukraine must include robust security guarantees to ensure that the war will not begin again. This must not be Minsk 3.0. That said, the United States does not believe that NATO membership for Ukraine is a realistic outcome of a negotiated settlement. Instead, any security guarantee must be backed by capable European and non-European troops. If these troops are deployed as peacekeepers to Ukraine at any point, they should be deployed as part of a non-NATO mission, and they should not be covered under Article 5. There also must be robust international oversight of the line of contact. To be clear, as part of any security guarantee, there will not be U.S. troops deployed to Ukraine. To further enable effective diplomacy and drive down energy prices that fund the Russian war machine, President Trump is unleashing American energy production and encouraging other nations to do the same. Lower energy prices, coupled with more effective enforcement of energy sanctions, will help bring Russia to the table. Safeguarding European security must be an imperative for European members of NATO. As part of this, Europe must provide the overwhelming share of future lethal and non-lethal aid to Ukraine. Members of this contact group must meet the moment. This means donating more ammunition and equipment, leveraging comparative advantages, expanding your defense industrial base, and importantly, leveling with your citizens about the threat facing Europe. Part of this is speaking frankly with your people about how this threat can only be met by spending more on defense. 2% is not enough. President Trump has called for 5%, and I agree. Increasing your commitment to your own security is a down payment for the future, a down payment, as you said, Mr. Secretary, of peace through strength. We're also here today to directly and unambiguously express that stark strategic realities prevent the United States of America from being primarily focused on the security of Europe. The United States faces consequential threats to our homeland. We must and we are focusing on security of our own borders. We also face a peer competitor in the communist Chinese with the capability and intent to threaten our homeland and core national interests in the Indo-Pacific. The U.S. is prioritizing deterring war with China in the Pacific, recognizing the reality of scarcity and making the resourcing trade-offs to ensure deterrence does not fail. Deterrence cannot fail for all of our sakes. As the United States prioritizes its attention to these threats, European allies must lead from the front. Together, we can establish a division of labor that maximizes our comparative advantages in Europe and Pacific, respectively. In my first weeks as Secretary of Defense, under President Trump's leadership, we've seen promising signs that Europe sees this threat, understands what needs to be done, and is stepping up to the task. For example, Sweden recently announced its largest ever assistance package. We applaud them for committing $1.2 billion in ammunition and other needed material. Poland is spending 5% of GDP on defense already, which is a model for the continent. And 14 other countries are co-leading capability coalitions. These groups are doing great work to coordinate Europe's contributions of legal assistance across 8 key capability areas. These are first steps. More must still be done. We ask each of your countries to step up on fulfilling the commitments that you have made. And we challenge your countries and your citizens to double down and recommit yourselves not only to Ukraine's immediate security needs, but to Europe's long-term defense and deterrence goals. Our transatlantic alliance has endured for decades, and we fully expect that it will be sustained for generations to come. But this won't just happen. It will require our European allies to step into the arena and take ownership of conventional security on the continent. The United States remains committed to the NATO alliance and to the defense partnership with Europe. Full stop. But the United States will no longer tolerate an imbalanced relationship which encourages dependency. Rather, our relationship will prioritize empowering Europe to own responsibility for its own security. Honesty will be our policy going forward, but only in the spirit of solidarity. President Trump looks forward to working together, to continuing this frank discussion amongst friends, and to achieve peace through strength together. Thank you.
No questions, I'm afraid. Secretary Hegseth, we hear you. We hear your commitment to NATO, to Article 5, to a sovereign Ukraine, and to your defence partnership with Europe. We also hear your concerns. On stepping up for Ukraine, we are and we will. On stepping up for European security, we are and we will. And you've just spoken about peace through strength. We are 50 nations strong here, all determined to put an end to Putin's war, to do so together. Ladies and gentlemen, we have work to do. I will now ask the media to leave.